I'm Luc Pescio. I'm the VP for Floating Gas Solution at Bumi Armada. This is a division that has been created very recently, about 2.5 years ago, and we are focusing on bringing to the market FLNGs and FSRUs, capitalizing on the experience of Bumi Armada as a FPSO owner and operator. Okay, so that's okay. There may be several aspects to that question. I mean, oil price. First of all, we have to consider, in a way, because FLNG would really be affected by LNG price as opposed to oil price. So the first question maybe we have to ask ourselves: how oil price is affecting LNG price? In this respect, I think what we can say is that there is not a full coupling between the two, as you know. I mean, today we are in a market where it's still disparity. So on the one hand, you have, for instance, the US market, which is fully decoupled from the oil price, since it's working on a Henry Hub index mainly. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have, for instance, countries like Japan, where there is a full indexation on crude oil. So really, globally, the LNG price does not react exactly as per the oil price. So in a way, that acts maybe as a damper to an implication of oil price onto the FLNG development. So that's maybe the first consideration that you need to consider. Then we have to really look at, in the current market of LNG, how the market analysts see the development of LNG pricing. So of course the oil price plays a downward pressure at the moment, but there is also the aspect of production capacity. So we all see that in the next few years the production capacity is going to increase significantly. So that does not really help in bringing the LNG pricing up. So definitely, I would say as a whole, in conclusion, there is definitely a downward pressure on FLNG developments. Now, having said that, maybe we have to look a little bit more in details because not all FLNG projects are created equal, or they are not profiling itself on the industry with the same aspects. So if we look at the big FLNG projects, such as the Preludes or the PFLNG of this world, I would say, of course, these projects are affected by a reasonably large capex, a long time to market, a long construction period, and probably this is where you would see the most acute effect of downward LNG pricing. I mean, we've seen the example recently with GDF Suez and their Bonaparte project in Australia, and that's a clear example that this segment of the FLNG industry is really becoming more under pressure. But what I believe is that at the same time, this pressure on LNG pricing may also create more opportunity for players like Bumi Armada or more generally the FPSO operators. Because what you really see at the moment is a sort of shift in the interest, especially from even oil majors or NOCs. If I took the example of Bonaparte, for instance, companies like GDF Suez or NG at the moment really have a renewed interest in different way of approaching FLNG, whether it's conversion or whether it's smaller capacity new building or whether it's nearshore systems on a lease and operate model. So all these current market conditions, I think at the end will probably boost a little bit the development that we are undertaking as far as looking at mid to small scale FLNG on lease and operate basis. So you can say yes, it's at the end of the day, oil price and indirectly and LNG price have affected FLNG developments, but I think it is really for us refocusing of the industry towards a different type of FLNG, smaller scale, different business model and different technology approach probably. So I think in this context, I mean that's where the FPSO operator can bring a lot in terms of experience to this developing market. First of all, I think we have to remember that FPSOs have been in operations for decades and successfully, and most of the FPSO operators therefore have a tremendous experience. It's not only in terms of design, because you can already see that For instance, an FLNG and an FPSO, you already are on an FPSO, you already have maybe, I would say, 80% to 70% of the design facility of the facilities that are there already. I mean, I'm talking about, for instance, gas pretreatment, power generation. I mean, these are systems that are already in operation on FPSOs. Mooring systems, same thing. So really, I mean, there is already, from a design point of view, there is a lot of experience that has been gained from FPSO operations, and that is coming from all the aspects of safety and marinization. But that's not the only thing. I mean, if we look at the construction, topside module, I mean, fabrication, integration into hull, again, these are usual issues that have been dealt with all FPSO operators. But probably I would say one of the most critical aspects that the FPSO operators bring to the table is their experience in the actual operations offshore. If we look at the market today, of course, we have the big shells that will soon, and Petronas will soon start the operation of their first FLNG. But when we look at the smaller developer, like ourselves or like our competitors from the LNG, coming from the LNG shipping industry, I think what you see that right now there's still a lot of question mark on how these FLNG are going to be operated. And what I would say there is that look at the FPSO model. I mean, over the last decades, as I said, we've been dealing with a fluid that is coming from a subsea reservoir, and we have to deal with all the offshore manning and operations. And an offshore operation really, for a company like Bumi Armada, it represents several hundreds of people, a management system in place, and that, of course, is something that can definitely be used and can be capitalizing upon when we talk about FLNG operation. At the end of the day, an FLNG operation is a bit more complex, of course, because you have more equipment, because you have higher safety issues due to the handling of gas and cryogenic fluids, but it is just more of an add-on to an existing operation that you would have on an FPSO. So I think definitely the FPSO operator do have a lot to bring on the table for these new FLNG developments. Well, first of all, breaking into the FLNG market, we have to realize what is the FLNG market today. I mean, because it is still an emerging market, so we still have a bit of difficulty defining what is the FLNG market. Having said that, I would say to try and be a bit more global and looking at the industry, how the industry has managed to penetrate and get into this market, definitely it's tough. I mean, if we look at the example of Shell, which probably the pioneer in this field, Shell have probably started a couple of decades ago on the FLNG development, invested millions and millions of dollars to arrive at this point. So that is definitely a very difficult and I would say long process before you can get into the FLNG market. Without the example of the big IOCs, I would still say that for instance, FPSO operators like Bumi Armada, of course, we are benefiting from this wave of development that has already started, a few years back. But nevertheless, FLNG is technically complex. It is capital intensive. It is a new market, so in terms of project financing, we really have to cope with novel issues that we have not been really encountering on FPSO projects. So yes, it requires, I would say, a lot of efforts, a lot of investment, and a lot of perseverance from FPSO contractors like ourselves to penetrate that market. Yeah, so of course, confidentiality permitting. A few things, however, I can disclose. Of course, the first and more important thing is that I think and that's the same for any companies that really wants to develop seriously into FLNG. You need to have your company management at the top level fully aligned with the strategy and supporting that strategy on the long term. FLNG is not a short-term view if you want to develop it seriously. So I think that's where it starts, and that's the first box that we managed to tick, that we have a clear strategy internally, and we have managed to obtain the board approval for that. And now the next step is, of course, what are the development that we are going to undertake. We have a first small success story. It's not directly FLNG, it's a floating storage unit. But for Bumi Armada, it's a very important small step, because that really cements the entry of Bumi Armada into the floating LNG market, and that's a good experience to start with. It's a very I would say good project, in the sense that it's in a stable country in Malta. It's for an 18-year contract, so that's for us a nice starting point. But having said that, we will be continuing developing FSRU projects, because we see that as a short-term market. We see that as a contrary to the FLNG, where I was saying earlier that it is currently under pressure due to the LNG pricing. I think that the import project, or the floating regasification project, would benefit from more incentive, because of course with low LNG price there is more incentive to develop import projects. So this is a size of the market, or a side of the market, that we believe and we will continue to pursue and secure our first projects. FLNG, as I said, we believe in it, because this is the natural evolution for an FPSO operator, where we can really use and capitalize our experience. And for that, we really believe that we need to come to the market with a solution that is already matured in terms of not only technical aspects, but also in terms of project execution, in terms of capacity to finance such a project. And that is the work that we are currently undertaking. I cannot really disclose at the moment what we are doing. I think probably in the next few months you will hear us being a bit more open to the public, because we are at the moment bound by confidentiality, but we are going to start a significant development on FLNG that will last until the end of the year, and then with the objective to come early next year to the market with a very strong and credible package. So that's currently our plan. Again, I will be able to disclose a bit more in the near future. But just to say that we heard a lot about conversion. Of course, we all know about new buildings. What we are saying is that we don't want to close the door to any kind of concept or opportunities, and we are looking at that very seriously at the moment. Having said that, just to conclude, I mean, even though we are developing and growing the expertise and the knowledge internally, we're still looking at specific opportunities, either in the West African market or a Southeast Asian market. But that is more on an opportunistic basis. Yeah, I think you see that underlying in my talk. Really a strong place that we feel is going to be played by the FPSO operator in the FLNG. At the moment, it's a bit under the radar screen, because in the limelight you have again the Petronas and the Shells. But if you look at the history, actually, and that's an interesting consideration. The first FPSO project was developed by Shell in the late 70s. It took probably almost a decade before FPSO took over as the way we are looking at now. And that started after the first FPSO was provided by one of the FPSO operator on a lease and operate basis. So that was really the tipping point, I would say, in the growth for the FPSO industry. The moment that really it came to the market with a lease and operate solution. So I believe, it's difficult. The story does not repeat itself. FLNGs are more complex, but nevertheless, I still believe that when the first few FLNG will have been proven from a commercial basis, more independents, more mid-caps will look at it as a really viable development solution. And I think that's where FPSO operators like Bumi Armada will have a strong role to play. Yes, I think first of all, I mean, congratulations for organizing a very a good event. I see that there is a lot of experts talking about on different panels, and I think the quality of the speakers is always increasing. But what probably struck me the most today when I arrived this morning, because I was there last year when you organized a similar conference here in Singapore, and I really saw that there is an increased number of attendees. And to me, I interpret that as, in the current context of, low LNG price, low oil price, a mood that is not really so enthusiastic, there is still an increasing interest in FLNG, which I think I found very interesting, and I'm looking forward to day number 2 and learn more from the event.